We are poor little lambs who have lost our way.
This message is transmitted at the request of the United States Office of Civil Defense at 3:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. NORAD detected a long-range nuclear missile launch in North Korea.
You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
The only real effect I can have is to create the impression that things aren't as bad as they are, to give our people time, the opportunity to survive.
I guess I just never realized I'd gone so far. We've lost so much control.
Totalitarianism doesn't need armies. It only needs to control a couple of things: the media and the ability to dispense privilege to some and withhold it from others. Of course, a weak and divided people helps.
There is only one holistic system of systems. One vast and immane, interwoven, interactive, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rands, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. Wake up, America, the change has begun. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring in your heart.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Zam here. Welcome to another exciting test episode of the all-new Surrounded by Idiots. Of course, on August 7th, that'll be the first Wednesday in August, we will be moving this show on Blog Talk over to a new network. We'll be telling you about that in the next week or so. If you'd like to talk to me for some reason, the phone number for the guest line is area code 347-215-8832, 347-215-8832. And if you'd like to email me, that would be billzam, BILLXAM, at USSAMichigan.com, billzam at USSAMichigan.com. And of course, our show notes will be appearing in person and live at USSAMichigan.com after the show, along with the high-definition audio version of this show. So let's get right to the big shoe here on Surrounded by Idiots. Today, believe it or not, is the day that the weather here in southeastern Michigan is finally going to become nice. It appears that the heat wave is finally over. This past Saturday, the weathermen had promised us that we're going to get some storms and everything was going to be A-OK after that. And they were correct, because the temperature went from 95 degrees to 90 degrees. And it went from 70% humidity to 100% humidity. So they were exactly right. The heat wave was over. In fact, it felt worse. But today, we finally had a cold front come through here, and we are going from a high of 85 today to a low of 50 degrees tonight. It might be time to actually bring in some house plants that we have outside. Absolutely amazing. It is actually very nice. Now tonight on the show, there we go. Was waiting for the web browser to come up so that I could use my show notes. Tonight on the show, we actually have yet another example of what we here at Surrounded by Idiots have been spouting off about. If you believe in the former United States of America as it was founded, a republic, you are a terrorist, believe it or not. If you believe in individual freedom you are a terrorist. If you believe that the current government is leading us down the path to communism a la Marx, you are most certainly a terrorist. Jim O'Neill, over there at Canada Free Press, has the exact same opinion that I have, and he has written a wondrous article about it. It's entitled, "If You Love Freedom, Then You Are a Mentally Ill Terrorist. The Government Says So." And we're going to, a couple of the topics that we're going to talk about here on the shoe has to do with the old Soviet Union. You'll see why as the show progresses. But here is the first little foray into the former Soviet Union. It lasted for 69 years, believe it or not, 69 years. And it was, as I'm sure all of you that have lived through it, and those of you that are too young to remember the Soviet Union, it was notorious for its heavy-handed suppression of political dissidents. And they had something that were called the Siberian gulags. Between 1960 and probably 1975, the Communist Party over there in the Soviet Union took their intolerance for deviance from the Communist Party ideology. They took it to extremes by diagnosing and institutionalizing so-called counter-revolutionaries with mental illness. If you stood up and said, you know, I don't quite agree with that, you're deemed mentally ill and put in the gulag. It was a very frightening episode worldwide, not just in the Soviet Union itself, because everybody in the free world had to sit and watch this, and it was quite disturbing. And Mr. O'Neill makes the point, what better way to deal with activists and naysayers than to diagnose them as unstable, mentally unstable. Dissenters, who are often seen as both a burden and a threat to the communist system, could easily be discredited and detained. And he goes on to talk about the definition of terrorism. It seems to be expanding at an alarming rate as the federal government and other left-leaning scholarly institutions, and you know who they are, the Ivy Leaguers and whatnot, they are not all, most are left-leaning. They're increasingly classifying seemingly harmless actions, such as cherishing personal liberty. If you say to yourself, or to anybody, you know, I believe that I have the personal liberty to do whatever it is that you want to do, that, according to these leftists that we now have running the country and teaching our children, is a form of terrorism. If you oppose abortion, you are a potential terrorist. Jason Howerton, he wrote or does write for Homeland Security Funded Study, and his that story is at The Blaze. You will be able to get all these links, of course, at our show page at ussamichigan.com. You can imagine my chagrin when I learned that not only are we the people being set up like bowling pins to take a fall, but we are also psychotic terrorists. Apparently, we are bad cogs when we fail to meekly fall into mindless, soulless, spineless acquiescence to the almighty general will. Stubborn, free-thinking patriots are the bane of progressive social engineers and their notorious propensity for pounding square pegs into round holes. How can our betters force us to be free when we keep telling them to F off and leave us alone? And they don't like that. It all has to do with the sustainability of the world, if you will. Let me see here. Let me see if I can find some... here we go. As a matter of fact, going down a couple of paragraphs, standing in the way of this grand elitist vision are pesky nation-states, that is, countries. Elites decided some time ago that nation-states had to go. This is the direction they're going in. They're trying to eliminate all countries, all nations. Consequently, they devised plans such as Agenda 21, and they encourage citizens of a country to be apathetic, if not outright hostile toward their country. The elites have utilized a plethora of different methods to accomplish this, and it's no easy task because people tend to bond to their place of birth and upbringing as a matter of course. Patriotism and pride in one's country has become déclassé, gauche, and so very out of style with the elites and their sicko pants. I hate it when I have sicko pants. But that is the direction that they are going in. They are calling people that don't agree with them terrorists. And that is a very disturbing trend. As I talked about in the last show, there are very good reasons for this, but I'm not going to get into it in this show because I wanted to talk about something that a lot of people have been talking about. That there is a source of information, and you probably heard this already, either on talk radio or possibly on your cable news. One of the main sources of information that I use for this show is called ZeroHedge.com, and they have a lot of great articles. Now, they've done an article that I want to talk about. A lot of people have talked about it. But the reason why I want to talk about it, and I might have some insights into this, is because I live in the area that we're going to be talking about. My wife was born in Detroit. Her family owns a business in Detroit. Her grandfather owned the first U-Haul dealership in Detroit. I know that all of the facts in this article are true because I am living the dream. Now, here in southeast Michigan, being made aware of this article that Zero Hedge has up there, and it's sickening and saddening at the same time because we've watched it happen during our lifetimes. It's a lesson in what throwing your support towards the terrible form of government that we have in the nation right now, and using that form of government across an entire country. Because you see, Detroit has been ruled by progressives for at least the past 50 or 60 years. And now we have a national government that is following the same path. And that is very, very disturbing. That the entire country is going to fall into this morass and cesspool of apathy if we're not careful. Let's look at 25 facts about the city of Detroit. At this point in time, the city of Detroit owes money to more than 100,000 creditors. That's people that are owed tax refunds. That is small businesses that do business with the city of Detroit and whatnot. Detroit is facing $20 billion of debt and unfunded liabilities. That breaks down to $25,000 per resident. In 1960, not that long ago, in my lifetime anyways, 1960, the city of Detroit had the highest per capita income in the entire nation and one of the highest in the world. In 1950, there were 296,000 manufacturing jobs in Detroit. Over 250,000 people, residents in the city of Detroit, were in the manufacturing industry. Within the city boundaries, 250,000 people worked in manufacturing. Today, there are less than 20,000 of those jobs left. 27,000 to be exact. Between December of 2000 and December of 2010, 48% of the manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan were lost. And it's not entirely due to Detroit. Because you see, we had a governor here in the grand state of Michigan called Jennifer Granholm. And before the rest of you got into the current recession that never ended in 2009, by the way, before the rest of the country and the world went into the recession, Michigan was in a recession already due to high taxes, poor business climate, and several other variations on punishments, you could call it, towards small businesses. Now, I started something called the Michigan League of Fed Up Citizens. If you're a fed up citizen, all you have to do is just let me know that you're a fed up citizen, and you will be a member of the Michigan League of Fed Up Citizens. That was formed because Jennifer Granholm, while we were in a recession, decided to raise the income tax in Michigan. Come hell or high water, she was going to have higher taxes. It's for the children, you know. For the children. We have to do it for the children because I refuse to reduce any of the services in the state of Michigan. So she raised the income tax here in the state of Michigan. We had and still have areas here in Michigan that are well above 20% unemployment. Michigan has been in a depression because of what that woman did. A real, honest-to-God depression. And this latest clown, Rick Snyder, he has an R after his name, and he is literally not any better. So, Michigan was and still is in a one-state depression. And that's where most of the 48% of the manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan went, is because of these people that the idiots in Michigan keep electing. There are houses available for sale in Detroit for $500 or less, and they're not that bad of a house. This is not a totally dilapidated type of situation. You can actually find homes that if you sink $10,000 into them, you can live in there just fine. So for an outlay of, say, $15,000, you can have yourself a nice house in the city of Detroit. At this point, there are approximately 78,000 abandoned homes in the city of Detroit. And that doesn't even include the ones that they've been tearing down with reckless abandon. 1/3 of Detroit's 140 square miles are either vacant or classified as derelict. An astounding 47%, nearly half of the residents in the city of Detroit are illiterate. Half of the residents are illiterate. That should be criminal. Less than half of the residents of Detroit over the age of 16 are working at this point. That's 50% unemployment in the city of Detroit. Do you think about that? 50% unemployment. And it's coming your way, folks. This type of government has been in place in Detroit since the 1950s. And it's the same type of government that you have at a national scale now. Detroit was once the 4th largest city in the United States, but over the past 60 years, the population has fallen by 63%. Detroit pulls in $11 million a month from the casinos in Detroit. If it weren't for those casinos, Detroit would be in a far, far worse state. Right now, there are 70 Superfund hazardous waste sites in the city of Detroit. 70 in a 140 square mile with 700,000 people living in the city of Detroit. There are 70 hazardous waste sites in Detroit. 40%, almost half of the streetlights do not work, and they can't afford to fix them. 1/3 of the ambulances are running at any one time. 1/3. Some ambulances in the city of Detroit have been used for so long they have 250,000 miles on them. 2/3 of the parks in the city of Detroit have been permanently closed since 2008. The police force in Detroit has been cut by 40% over the past 10 years. When you call the police in Detroit, it takes 58 minutes for them to respond. And this one has actually changed in the past 24 hours. Due to budget cutbacks, most police stations in Detroit are now closed to the public 16 hours a day. There has been an executive decision in the city of Detroit. The police stations will now be open 24 hours a day for the citizens as a place of safe refuge. Got it? Like the Green Zone in Baghdad. The violent crime rate in Detroit is 5 times higher than the national average. The murder rate in Detroit is 11 times higher than New York City. The police in Detroit solve less than 10% of the crimes that are committed in Detroit. Crime has gotten so bad in Detroit, the police are telling people to enter Detroit at your own risk. That is how bad it's gotten. An American city is actually that bad. And it's only 50 miles east of where I'm sitting right now. There is a city, Hamtramck, in here in southeast Michigan. They are actually considering building a 12-foot wall along their border with Detroit. That's how bad the crossover crime has gotten in Hamtramck. It would be a real hoot if Hamtramck built their border fence before the United States did. That would be funny as anything. So, there you go. Our next story is a new fair housing rule that establishes diversity data for every neighborhood in the U.S. This is what they're doing, folks. This is what they're planning on doing. HUD is going to take census material, NSA material, satellite images, and other information, and they are going to build a diversity database for every neighborhood in the United States to try and make your neighborhood more diversified. In the old Soviet Union, North Korea and China, you lived where and do live where the central government tells you to. You do what they tell you, or you go to the gulags or prison. This is what totalitarian governments do. It's a sign of communism, fascism, and now it's coming to the former United States of America. And the wording of this article is all sugar-coated. So if you don't keep your wits about you, if you don't stay divorced emotionally from this article, you could very easily get sucked into this. Here's how the article goes. To ensure that every American is able to choose to live in a community they feel proud of, HUD has published new fair housing regulation intended to give people access to better neighborhoods than the ones they live in. This proposed rule represents a 21st century approach to fair housing, a step forward to ensuring that every American is able to choose to live in a community they feel proud of. And it goes on and on and on. What they're actually talking about is this. We'll wait for this to come up on the screen here. This is a event that the Northeast Ohio Freedom Alliance, and since they have freedom in their name, they have been targeted by the IRS and also our terrorists. Facts about Agenda 21. A lot of people don't know what Agenda 21 is, which is really sad. So here is your information. Most Americans have not heard about Agenda 21. It is essentially a blueprint for a sustainable world that was introduced at the UN conference in 1992. The philosophy behind Agenda 21 is that our environmental problems are the number one problem that we are facing, and that those problems are being caused by human activity. Therefore, Agenda 21 according to Agenda 21, hold on a second, I'm trying to get, there we go. According to Agenda 21, human activity needs to be tightly monitored. And one of the things that is the linchpin of Agenda 21, one of the linchpins of Agenda 21 is fair housing regulations. So I'll take you back to HUD's new fair housing guidelines. The fella that, let me see, what's his name here? HUD Secretary Sean Donovan. For the first time ever, Donovan said, HUD will provide data for every neighborhood in the country, detailing the access African American, Latino, Asian, and other communities have to local assets, including schools, jobs, transportation, and other important neighborhood resources. Donovan said HUD's new neighborhood mapping tool, which uses census data, will expand access to high opportunity neighborhoods and draw attention to investment policy possibilities in underserved communities. Which means that if you live in a neighborhood where the houses cost, say, $250,000, okay? You have to have a certain level of income in order to be able to afford that $250,000 house. But here comes HUD with their new fair housing guidelines. You know, as well as I do, you know damn well, just like I do, what they're going to do is they're going to provide incentives, mortgage price breaks, assistance, so that somebody with, say, no job can afford one of these nice $250,000 houses, providing that they're a minority, in order to balance out the neighborhood. I have lived in many neighborhoods where this has happened. The condominium complex where my mother lives was started this way. At one point, after everybody moved in and didn't bother paying their mortgage, where my mother lives was they had a 78% foreclosure rate. They were going to tear the entire place down, the entire neighborhood, because of what HUD had done in that neighborhood. They used to have a some type of a program where all you had to do is like put $5,000 down on a home and you could move in. Well, a lot of people put the $5,000 down and then they never paid the mortgage, never paid a penny on that mortgage, and they all got kicked out. This is a redux of that plan that was in the 1970s. I think it was called U-235 program. It helped out a lot of people, helped out my mother. She was able to afford that condominium for my brother and myself, and the three of us lived in that condominium, and that's where I was raised. But a lot of these people, and I don't care if they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, a lot of these people just didn't bother to pay the mortgage. And all the houses, all the condos went into foreclosure. It drove down the property value. So if you have somebody that doesn't have a job, somebody that's used to living in a really, really crappy house, that's like cardboard walls and everything else, that they've kicked holes in and everything else, moving into a nicer neighborhood, they're going to bring the property values down for everybody, and before you know it, the whole thing's going to be a shithole, just like Detroit. This is what they did to Detroit. This is the exact same thing that they did to Detroit, and now they have a plan to do it for the entire country. So everybody sit back and plan on building yourself some 12-foot walls. And tonight's last story, because this test is going very, very well, thank you. I'm going to end it so I can actually go and have some dinner. We actually have good news. Do you remember the guy that they called the Fourth Amendment man? The guy that was going to fly someplace, and he really didn't feel like playing the TSA games, so he used a magic marker and wrote the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution regarding searches and seizures on his chest. He got to the TSA booth, stripped down to his underwear with his Fourth Amendment written on his chest. Well, he got arrested, of course, and that's when he sued the TSA and the airport. Here's the article. A man who stripped nearly naked to make a point about his constitutional rights scored a victory after forcing airport personnel to steady up on the First and Fourth Amendments, according to the Wall Street Journal. And hang on a second here. I believe I have the article right here. Richmond International Airport, where this happened, officials have reached a settlement with the guy by the name of Aaron Toby. That's the guy's name. The so-called Fourth Amendment flasher. In 2010, Toby was arrested for allegedly disorderly conduct at a checkpoint of the Virginia airport for stripping down to his running shorts. On his bare chest, Toby had scrawled the text of the Fourth Amendment in protest of the use of full-body scanners, which produced naked images of passengers. The charge against him was dropped, and Toby later sued the Richmond Airport Police and the TSA, claiming they violated his First Amendment rights. If his idea was to give airport security agents a lesson on constitutional rights, Toby got his wish, because they have to attend a 2-hour seminar on passengers' First and Fourth Amendment rights. There was a separate settlement with the TSA. Government attorneys agreed not to appeal the Fourth Circuit ruling or further prosecute Mr. Toby for interfering with TSA procedures, according to the Rutherford Institute, who represented Toby. Frankly, the nation would be better served if all government officials were required to undertake training courses and on what it means to respect the constitutional rights of the citizenry, said John W. Whitehead, president of the Rutherford Institute, a conservative legal defense group. Note to myself, let's see if we can get John W. Whitehead on the show. And there you go. That is actually very good news. The TSA has been schooled in constitutional rights of the citizenry. And we have been on the air over half an hour. The Skype connection to blogtalkradio.com is working very nicely. It has not been dropped, and apparently the throughput is very, very excellent. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit this show to a half an hour. Beginning in August, the first Wednesday in August, I'll be doing a 2-hour show. I will have a co-host and everything, and we will have some very, very nice music for commercials, like, let's see, this one right here. This is some of the music that we have for the new show.
In particular,
there, and here's another one. And of course, not only do we have that, we also have the world-famous Star Trek fight song. And that's how we're going to close the show tonight. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and watching and listening to the show. The high-definition version with the show notes will be up at YouTube later tonight, and at USSAMichigan.com we will have all of the high-definition audio version, as well as the show notes that you can refer to and follow all the links that we talked about on tonight's show. So until the next show, which I don't know when it's going to be, we'll see you guys later, and here is the Star Trek fight song.